gets us through life when we don't know what to say, but need to have it said. And so, for instance, I always use it as an example of this, the funeral liturgies. We know how to do a funeral. We know how to take somebody to a cemetery because the churches have taught us. And what those churches have taught us get us through moments of shock and pain and loss that nothing else can, because there's a ritual that says you do this and you do this and you do this and you do this. And when it's over, you suddenly remember somebody died and your life has to change now. But the community, the church community has come, picked you up, taken you through it. That we can never, ever lose, because people go into churches, go into our Eucharist, go into our prayer groups when they are deathly in need of words and have no words. And only the comfort of that scaffold tells them what to do next. And it does incorporate, it does integrate in every different culture, the cultural needs of that group and age, and you must be very, very sensitive to that. But on the other hand, you can never just, I don't think, throw this thing into midair and hope it comes down with some sort of form, because that ancient form is what reminds you that wherein you put your hope has been the hope of the ages. They weren't wrong. Those great Protestant hymn writers were talking grand theology, Rock of Ages. Those hymns, those great movements, are a conversation that make other conversation possible. So choosing them is terribly important. The sermon is extremely important because it legitimates other people's conversation and concerns. That's all we're doing here. We are legitimating the concerns in your heart. And then you have to form these groups that enable the depth of these conversations to move on. It's all a package, and not one single part of it can substitute for the rest.
I wonder if the communities of Taizé might be a good example of that. Be young people, they think, but it's still ritual, it's still the office. Yes, in the back, gentlemen. Right there. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I was looking behind you.
I struggle with the people who would never occur to them that church would be the place to go when they're having that internal crisis. So can you talk a little bit about what we can, look at the age of us. I mean, I think I might be helping bring down the age, which is kind of pathetic. So the question for me is, how do we take this conversation to people who would never occur to them to come to a church when they're in crisis?
I'm not being flip. I'm telling you, it's wonderful stuff. This whole country's philosophical, theological, liturgical sensitivity is being changed by book groups. They're free to discuss it. And then many of them, at least a lot of the Roman Catholic ones, will liturgize at the end. They will bring it into a prayer. And certainly the Friends of Benedict do that. That you center yourself in prayer, ask for the guidance, and then suggest the common liturgy. I worry. I share your worries. And I think it is at a great moment of transition. And in a moment of transition, it is not, you'll always see the nativism. The traditionalism will rear its head at that resistance point that is very, very strong. And, we're coming close to the end here. When I come back in the next world, we'll do a model of social change. Because that model of social change shows you where you are right now. There isn't any way to fix this. There's only a way to enable these ideas to grow embedded in faith that can eventually move people. This is happening for exactly the reason I said early in the lecture last night. Your 9th grade grandchildren know more about this subject. I am told by people everywhere in this country, from one coast to the other, our kids don't go to church anymore. They say, we don't believe that stuff. Because what they're getting out here, as the bishop said, this is where the conversation's going on. Out here they're talking evolution to these kids. These aren't dumb kids. They say, well, if that's true, then this isn't. It's like the Greeks, who, when the philosophers rose and began to look at all the reasons for the struggles of life, the people, the ancients, went back to their religion that we so flippantly call mythology, meaning fantasy. How could anyone ever believe that? Well, you believe a couple things that look pretty silly to other people too. And the Greeks said, finally began to ask themselves, I swear there was a Friends of Benedict convention there, and they all got together, and around the water cooler they said, listen, tell me something, alone at night, when you go to bed, do you really believe in the God who eats his own children? They began to examine every one of their myths, and the mythology died. So what this gentleman is asking for is bigger than a change in the scaffold. He's saying what you're saying. How do we get these conversations here under the mantle of a traditionalism that is sacred to us? And I'm telling you, you better do it. Because the big conversation out there is saying secretly, how in heaven's name do you explain a society where you now can have a conference, a national convention of atheists? This is not funny. This tells you that there is a counter-movement, just like the philosophers were a counter-movement to the Greeks. Science is becoming a counter-movement to the faith. So if you don't answer his question and figure out how to get a wonderful conversation like you are enabling here about these scientific questions in religion, it's going to be too late.
That's right. Yes.
This is a completely off topic, but to me, the topic is worthless if we can't deal with it. How do we bring Benedictine spirituality to the front page of the Post with Israel and Gaza going to war again and again and again?
Robert?
Kurt?
It's called return is fair play.
I don't have the answer to that, obviously. But one of the central tenets of the rule of Benedict, which he holds out to us, is seek peace and pursue it. And it is a continual demand. I mean, so much of the rule is a set of practices, reminders. Remind yourself daily that you're going to die. Seek peace and pursue it. And these are things that if we remind ourselves of enough, I think there is this overflow effect. And if we say it enough in the churches, we might actually find ourselves moved in small ways, and some of us in large ways, to make a change. That will vary from where we are, whether we're a senator or a nobody. Of course, nobody's a nobody.
Yes.
I'd just like to make one comment, address it to the whole panel. I appreciate what you're saying about atheists. I'm not one. That's sort of the Richard Dawkins type of, what I'm talking about more is like Dawkins. People, a lot of people have given up on God through the scientific lens. Those with some imagination know that when they go to bed at night, they think there's something more. I deal with this a lot. I'm an economist, and then I became an executive coach. A lot of what you say, I try to incorporate. The problem I see is that people, the enemy of faith right now, belief, is religion itself. People see wars going on because of religion. And, that religion is destroying many, many societies. It's not the scientists who are putting religion in a bad light. It's the people who, at the extremes, are using religion for other purposes. And I guess the only way to counter that is to be faithful to what we try to do and to try to bring a routine of life and peace. There are a lot of people who are looking for something, particularly middle-aged executives, and they're looking to save their soul. And one of the things I try to do is bring some of the lessons of Benedict into the coaching, but I can't bring God directly. But you make it a little bit easier.
Well, religion could bring God a little better than we do. For instance, religion itself could have formal discussions like this on, is there such a thing really anymore as a just war theory? No. Is there room for that when there is no distinction now between competence and non-competence? None. When 90% of the people who died in Iraq because of us are women and children, not soldiers. If you want to be safe during war now, you join the army. You don't leave an army. The dead are the civilians, and they're women and children largely, the ones left behind in the villages while the men are either fighting or have the ability to run, as they should, because they can't defend and they hope that their families will be safe, and they're not safe. We have to look, I think, at what you are, that gentleman is teasing around the edges. Look at the theology that is undergirding that kind of stuff. I bet you can't get it through. I bet you can't get that discussion through a parish in Washington, D.C. yet. It would be tough. It would be tough because you're in a city who's geared to this, who will talk about a fiscal cliff but will say, we cannot cut one cruise missile, not one, to feed the poor. Try those conversations if you want some real conversations. Because somehow or other, until we stop as religious figures under supporting that, it's going to go on.
We have time for maybe one more question, maybe two.
Hey there, I'm in that 30-something category that we talked about several times last night.
You're the only one in this room. Wait, there's two.
And so this question is more about the unchurched. And I have been to church in D.C. on a Sunday morning and then walked into a coffee shop afterwards and noticed that there are plenty of people who clearly are not interested in going to church. Many of them are my age. So if I walked in with your book, for instance, or something that said the Rule of St. Benedict, what would you say to the person that asked me, what is that about? Why are you reading that?
This is a great
What's
question.
that effect?
It's a simple answer. This is about how to live a happy and fulfilling life. This is how to integrate both your inside and your outside. This is how to make sense of newspaper headlines and the things your parents taught you. This is about real life now. That's what I say.
We were joking before that all of us underline every line of every page. Yeah. So I decided I was going to go back and check all the places where she said Benedictine spirituality is. Well, I ran out of notebooks. But here's some of the things she said. Respect for time, a simpler approach to life, community, spirituality of the open heart, listening to the Gospels, the rules, one another, and the world, managing power and control. All of those things could be part of your answer. Another question? Another question? Right there, the blue. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, yesterday you talked about the different gods in your life, and also Mariann talked about holding things in tension. And my question is, how can there be a God through destruction, both human, natural, and, I don't know, like unknown, like car accidents or somebody, busting into a place and killing a bunch of people?
I think she's asking, where is God in those kinds of terrible things that have happened?
Or is there another force in the world?
No, it's life. We're working out life. There are some crude T-shirts that say it much better. Life happens. When you hear Simone Biles, if you say that quotation over a couple times, God can only do the impossible, because God has left the possible to us to do. So most of our problems in life, you get cancer because human cells die. That's life. You have divorces because it didn't work. That's life. It's not an answer to what did I do to deserve this question. That's an old pagan question. And I have heard wonderful people say, you know, I went to church, I was a daily churchgoer. I never really, I sent all my kids to Catholic, I did all of it, and look what happened to me. Why? That's that old, why do bad things happen to good people? Because there is a natural process to life while we're learning. And that is not open to magic, that's open to the spirit. That's open to the heart. That's open to faith. That's the space in between. Faith, that I can get through this. Where does my hope come from? Hope is not a hedge against despair. Hope comes out of despair. The very first thing you survived is the only proof you have that God will take you through the next one. That's where hope comes from. Because somehow or other, the power of life that God imbues the world with is indeed companioning us. When you come to the notion that God is with you to sustain you, to enable you, to support you, to beckon you, then you are living with the living God. And then you don't ask folks, what did I do to deserve this? You didn't do anything to deserve it. It's life. People die. People go. The economy explodes. They don't elect the person you voted for. That's life. That's life. So you live with it and you work with it because God is with you doing that. And this life will be better because you did it. You will be better because you did it. And you will be closer to God in the conscious doing of it. It's a sacred making thing. It's not a trouble-making thing. It's life, faith, and the presence of God is the way you get through. That's life. You don't need God the trickster, because you have God the companion.
Another industry, that's a wrap. When I grow up, I want to be you, by the way. That's exactly right. We promised that we would end today at 11:30. I just want to make 2 or 3 other points about Friends of St. Benedict. Website is benedictfriend.org. If you are not a member and would like to receive our mailings, which will begin right away, please go to the website and you can join. I don't know if we can join here. Rachel, where's Rachel? Is she gone? Betty, do we have the ability to join here? We can figure something out. We are also available. We do Benedictine programs at parishes. We will help you develop a Benedictine Way group. We run 3 or 4 Benedictine experiences across the country that happen that are 6 and 7 days long. We would love you to join us at. We've got a new monastic council coming soon, a monastery affiliate program coming soon. We encourage you to join us. We have probably not thanked Catherine Held enough, who is standing right here, and she didn't know I was doing this, she wouldn't be standing, I can tell you. All of the food and the receptions are courtesy of Catherine Held. With the board, please raise your hand. The board of Friends of St. Benedict, they are all around the room. This was done by the board, the whole event was conducted by them. finish by saying thank you to the panel, Robert, Bishop Mariann, and the wonderful Joan Chittister. Thank you very much. Have a safe trip home. Oh, and the book table is still open over there. And oh, before we go, we have small gifts for our speakers, which I almost forgot. Thank you all. Be careful going home.